Welcome to The Prisoner's Dilemma, the show where we watch and talk about the 1960s TV show The Prisoner. I'm Brendan, and with me is a man that can answer any conceivable question, Matthew.
That's right. It's me, Matthew. Hello, Brendan. How are you doing?
I'm doing just fine, Matthew. I was wondering, can you tell me what is Australia?
Well, since I knew I know the answer to every question, I also knew that you were going to ask me that question.
Wow.
So I can confidently tell you that Australia is a dream.
Interesting. What happened in 1991?
I was born. Listener, you wouldn't be aware of this, but there was some pre-record about the year I was born and mushrooms.
And specifically how old we each are compared to one another.
Yes.
You know what? I'm sick of your questions. I'm going to throw some Mountain Dew on you, and you overload and explode. You're dead now.
Okay, sounds good. Bye.
This week, we watched The General.
The General.
Matthew, is it safe to call this the first Monster of the Week episode of The Prisoner?
Oh, yeah. That's a really good way to put it. I hadn't thought about that. I think that's really true, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. I think Monster of the Week, surely it existed previously, but I think it was really codified with the X-Files and the way that show is structured, where you get episodes that are about the story, that are the lore episodes, that are like, here's the big ongoing thing that this show is ostensibly concerned about. And here are the serialized episodes that are like, here's just something that happens when they're on the job.
Yep. Here's a guy who, is sort of a vampire, and he creates like a newspaper paper mache nest, and he lives there.
Here's a shape changer with a tail.
Yep. Here's a weird human fluke monster that lives in the sewers.
Here's a weatherman who can also control the weather, and he's in love. Now, famously, a lot of people who watch the X-Files say those are the good ones.
Yes, that is the thing they say. I mean, there are some good ones in there, for sure.
Sure. In contrast, this episode.
Yeah?
This episode sucks.
Oh, wow. Dang. Okay.
And here's the thing. Here's the thing. I know we're going to get worse episodes. So I can't completely lambast this one, but like this, I think I feel I feel about this episode the way that I kind of did about season 4 of Danger Man, actually.
Oh, sure.
Where I am aware that a better version of this exists. And I have seen the ways that many of the people involved in the production of this show are good at this kind of thing. And there are enough good things in it, particularly in terms of the caliber of the performers.
Sure, yeah,
that
totally.
I can very easily envision. Here is the version of this episode that would please me, Brendan, the person that is watching the show.
Interesting.
But as it all comes together, I think this is the first one in my rewatch where I'm like, I don't know if I needed this.
That's fascinating. I am middling on this episode, but I'm not nearly this negative. So I'm really curious to hear where this is coming from.
Sure, absolutely. With that, maybe we should just say what it is that happened. Maybe we should describe.
Summarize.
maybe we should summarize.
Yeah.
And by we, I mean you.
I can do that.
What happens in The General?
After the intro, in which we learn that we have once again been graced by the Milkmaster Supreme in Colin McGordon's number 2, we meet number 6 as he hears a village announcement that a speed learn lesson is about to begin. 6, unlike everyone else, ignores this announcement, only to be approached by a new number 12, who hints mysteriously at SpeedLearn and its 2 creators, the Professor and the General. 6 then spots the Professor running from a mob of villagers who quickly drag the man away. But in the chaos, 6 finds and hides a tape recorder containing the Professor's anti-SpeedLearn message. Back at home, 6 watches the SpeedLearn lesson on the TV, a surreal broadcast that imbues in 6 exact knowledge of dates and figures in European history since Napoleon. 2 briefly visits 6, promising him his freedom for the Professor's tape recorder. That night, 6 returns for the Professor's tape recorder and finds it and 12, who exposes the flaw of SpeedLearn. It only leads to memorization, not understanding. After 6 spends some time investigating the Professor's wife as a potential, but wrong, answer to the identity of the General, he meets 12 again, who gives him an opportunity to broadcast the Professor's anti-SpeedLearn message. Just before the next lesson, 6 breaks into the broadcast studio, but is caught. Suspicious, 2 brings 6 and 12 before the General, who is revealed to be a massive supercomputer, which can, quote, answer any question, end quote. Before 2 can use it to expose 12, 6 asks it a question that destroys the machine, killing the Professor and 12 in the process. The question, W-H-Y, question mark. Why?
There's some pieces here.
Yeah, uh-huh.
Okay.
Okay.
First of all, need to address. I'm trying really hard to meet this thing on its own terms, right?
Sure, totally.
It's 1967.
It is.
We're having fun. Everyone's kissing. Everyone's having sex. Everyone's looking forward to the future.
Yeah. Everybody's smoking and drinking.
Everyone's smoking and drinking, and they love the idea of science and what it's going to do for us.
Sure.
And people and one lone man, Patrick McGowan, is a little bit nervous about what he sees on the horizon. But more, I'm being silly. What I'm really saying is this idea of like, oh, well, aren't computers going to be a thing? Aren't computers suddenly something that we can imagine having more of an impact on our daily lives now that we have learned the word computer? And they're small enough that they can fit into a single room. So I understand the fascination. I'm not judging it for being like cornball in 2024, looking back on like, oh, it was a big computer, it was a bad guy. That's not what I'm saying. What I think drags this down for me is that this is an episode that real rapid fire introduces a number of concepts.
Yeah.
In an episode called The General, we get introduced in the first couple of minutes to the General, the Professor, SpeedLearn, and a number of, frankly, just characters who are propped up as like these are going to be components of the mystery who we've never seen before, but seem to be staples of the way the village is constructed that are independent of the whole village franchise. We don't get Vanilla Fielding in this episode. There's no mention of number 1. There's no there's so little of what we have come to expect, and I'm here for it, but they don't do any of the setup, and very little of it pays off. Like, of those things that I just mentioned, 1 or 2 of them are important for the ending. The character of the Professor is basically a non-entity.
Right. Yeah, I mean, you're not wrong. You're not wrong on any of that. I think the episode is certainly dated in terms of like the technology at play, right? And there's definitely doing a lot of like red herring work that doesn't really work. I completely agree with you there. I think that the episode is timely still in terms of like concerns around education and particularly around like, what people are calling quote unquote generative AI right now. Right. There are themes that are still resonant here, I think.
And I completely agree with you. And this is, I think, what leads to my source of frustration, where I could pretty easily dismiss this if I weren't so interested in what the show seems to be trying to do. Um, it's clear that they are on to a couple of things and they happen to have some good actors in place. It's just
Sure.
the script and the edit, I think, really, really don't do it any favors. I chalk part of this up to the fact that I call this a Monster of the Week episode. That's very true in that this was basically a work for hire episode, both for the writer and the director. The writer was Louis Griefer using the pseudonym Joshua Adam. I think you've got some notes on him, but this is the only episode of The Prisoner that he wrote. I don't know why he used a pseudonym for this. Those are both the names of his sons, so I don't know if that was just
that's
him.
why.
But why use a pseudonym at all, aside from I'm working on The Prisoner, so I'm going to use a weird code name or something like that? Was he like trying to dodge obligations for some other contract or something? I researched, I couldn't find anything.
I don't believe there's any clear answer on this. I think from what I found in terms of what he said, this episode was inspired by his own anxieties around how his children were being taught in school. And so because of that, he was like, I'm going to pay homage to that source of this episode with this name. That's as far as I can tell.
Sure. And then the original director, who I cannot find named, was fired on the set by McGowan himself.
Wow.
Who then called up
Peter Graham Scott.
Peter Graham Scott, who he'd worked with on Danger Man quite a bit, would work with him again on Jamaica Inn, was good buddies with, who was working on some other stuff at the time. But McGowan called his boss and basically got permission to get him 2 weeks off so that he could come work for ITV.
Wow.
In order to basically do a pickup job being director.
Wow.
None of this happened at Port Merion, much to Scott's dismay. He wouldn't get to visit Port Merion until later.
Man.
So all this was done back on sets. But yeah, it was basically very mercenary for some of the key creative people that were involved.
Yeah. Peter Graham Scott, I don't know if you saw this quote, but he quoted himself as, he got picked for this because he was, quote, cheap and quick.
It feels that way.
I think there's some cool directorial things in this episode still, even despite that.
Sure. I listened to the director commentary with him. I have mentioned before how, so again, I'm using the relatively recently released Prisoner Blu-rays. I don't know how recent this is, but it was certainly within the past 10 years or so. So it was quite a ways off from having recorded the thing, more so than any of the other directors so far. Scott had very little to say about the actual making of the thing. He spends most of the time talking about how good the actors were, and how much he wishes they had gotten better roles and better careers after the fact. By the end of the episode, he basically has nothing to say about what's going on or how it was made. In the finale, the only thing he says is, I don't want to be rude about this, but British actors can make a slightly incredible script, a slightly far-fetched script, a lot more interesting, a lot more approachable, basically. I don't know if he really got it or really knew what everything was being put together, but he was there for 2 weeks and he got it done on time, so...
Salutes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it that makes a lot of sense. And it's also interesting, compared to the other episodes we've talked about, there's relatively few changes from the script into the episode. Like it's largely they're just shooting the script.
Right.
Which is very different and does also get this sense of like they were not giving this the time it may be needed or the iterations it may be needed.
Or the edits. Right? Like there's entire characters here where if you just like chop
you could get rid of them for sure.
You'd have a leaner, meaner a script where the characters that did remain would have, I don't know, some motivation or lines.
Okay.
All that said, I think there's some neat stuff in here. Certainly, apart from the themes, some of the presentation stuff is really cool.
Yeah, for sure. Should we just jump into it?
I think so.
So,
hey, Matthew,
you mentioned, what's up?
It can be done.
It can be done.
Trust me.
Yep. The posters are great.
100% enrollment 100%
100%
pass rate.
Mm-hmm.
Ridiculous. With the
It
most,
is ridiculous.
With the most like, so this is a poster that's scattered around Port Merion to advertise this sudden educational course that has taken the village by storm.
Right.
But it has a picture of the professor on it, and it is him like the most anxious promotional still of a man you could possibly find. It is so scary.
Yeah.
It is very clearly a picture of a man that is being held against his will.
Yeah. Yeah. One of the things I will say going for this episode is I think it has a really nice feeling of everything is in that sort of surreal mode that the prisoner can sometimes get into, right?
Mm-hmm.
But as opposed to something like, for example, Free for All, which is just like dreamscape dream logic, right?
Right.
Everything still feels like we're in a space. It's just that there's like surreal elements in that space.
Yes, I will agree to that. I think, to say something nice, the art direction and the way that the space and everything is thought out is very, very well done. I think particularly when we get into some more of the sci-fi elements, the sci-fi spaces that occur later in the show, all that is really well done.
Yeah. I think even this very first location, right? Like, obviously this is on set. They're not really at Port Merion at all here, right? But they've built this really interesting little, like, hillside cafe set.
Yeah, it's
right?
nice.
Which we've never seen before. And it gives the location this, like, almost, like, Seussian quality to it,
yes.
right? Like, weird angles, weird, building shapes. I think it's really nice.
Yeah, very toyetic, very playground.
Yes.
One thing I think that is noteworthy about the villagers in this episode.
A
lot of young people.
Oh, yes.
Tons of young couples, a lot of men with beards.
Yep.
Previously we've remarked on how many old people there are in the village.
Sure.
Things about the way this village or this episode is composed lead me to think have got me thinking a little bit more about what the intention of the village is, really.
Sure. I think part of it is that they wanted to have people who could read as like still being in university. Right.
Absolutely.
One person who is not super young is our waiter. We have Keith Piat as the waiter, who's number 26, which is bonkers, by the way. Like, number 26 was like number 2's assistant. I don't know why they use that number, except again, this was like fast and cheap, right?
Yep.
He was Keith Piat is the stage and early TV actor. He was also in the Aztecs. Remember that image you showed me, I thought it was Egyptian. So he's also in that show, which is funny. He was also in Avengers and Doctor Who, and The Prisoner was one of his last TV performances. And it's through him, because we get this announcement from this American voice, right? We'll meet him later, saying that Speed Learn is about to happen, right? And then the waiter really introduces this idea of, hey, this is what Speed Learn is, right? I heard this things from the general that you're never too old to learn, things like that. It is interesting that he says, especially when we learn later what the general is, that he says that he heard from the general that you're never too old to learn.
I mean, maybe it's part of the propaganda. So let's you summarize this, but I really want to call this out, so that people understand what we're talking about here. They're sitting at this cafe, and an announcement comes over the radio or the speaker.
Yep,
that's a message from the general's office. The general's not speaking, but it's this other announcer who, again, is not Isabel, our wonderful person that comes over. This is Tom Nook. Tom Nook is on the radio and is saying the general wants everyone to go home and turn on their TVs because the professor's lecture is about to begin. So right away, we're told there is someone called the general and the professor who seems to operate at the behest of the general.
Yeah, it's vague.
It is vague.
All the young people run off, and that's when we get this like interaction between number 6 and this waiter, number 26. Though notably, even before the announcement hits, we get this like new young guy, number 12, a new number 12, which is really interesting given that last episode's number 12, who's just sort of like staring at number 6.
This is Mark it on the calendar. This is the gayest the show has been so far.
It's true.
This is
true.
This is two gay guys discover. This is one gay guy discovers that in this sleepy North Welsh town, there's one other gay guy. And if they're not going to hook up, then at least they can talk. At least they can be like, get a load of all these old people.
Yeah.
Get a load of this Dr. Seuss-esque village.
It's true. So this is John Castle.
Do we swear on the show? I should not swear.
We do swear on this swear. We do swear on this show. We've sworn before. We've specifically said something along the lines of Patrick McGowan says, "What the fuck?" Like that's an actual quote. It's in the script or something like that.
That's weird. What do you think Patrick McGowan's favorite swear is?
Oh man, I don't know. That's a good question. Damn, I think probably.
I bet it's like hell's bells.
That might be. He is deeply Christian, right? So maybe he wouldn't want to curse at all. So this is John Castle as number 12, right? He played a lot of like stern and nefarious TV and film actors. Prisoner was his first TV role, which is pretty cool. You mentioned before that the director was sort of lamenting that people didn't have careers after this, but John Castle definitely did. So after this, he would end up being Joffrey in The Lion in Winter.
Alongside Gene Marrow.
Yep. He was in RoboCop 3. He was, for me, this is exciting. He was the Duke in Man of La Mancha, which is a musical version of Don Quixote. Mm-hmm. And he was posthumous in I, Claudius. Awesome. So he got some like real actual acting roles after this. And he's good. He's believable as like this weird, unclear if you can trust him, unclear what's going on thing. He does like check out number 6, like look him up and down, which is great to see.
He is really good. I really wish we had more of him in this series.
Yeah, more on that, I think, as we get towards what happens to 12.
Yeah, John Castle I like. Number 12 I'm not quite certain on, but at least here he seems to just be like an element that number 6 needs to keep track of.
Yeah, I don't think there's much else in this first scene, right? I already gestured at it. Like 12 sort of like says something, hints at like, hey, the professor could be your ticket out of here, right? 6 says that he wants to escape. More on that later in this episode as well. And then they spot the professor running down the beach being chased by a mob. The villagers love to do this, by the way.
Villagers love to chase in a mob.
Always.
Again, it's a very Brave New World. It's very like
true.
They could be sparked into just this force of verve, right? They are very, very suggestible.
Yes.
One thing before we leave the cafe, number 6 does manage to get a cup of coffee out of this waiter who charges him 2 work units for it. Did you see how he pays for it?
No, I didn't.
He hands over like not bigger than a business card, but not quite as big as a dollar bill.
Oh,
something, and the waiter like punches holes in it to mark that he's like spent that money or something like that.
Yeah. My only other thing in this scene was a thing you already gestured at, which is that like all of this comes out of nowhere, right? But with 6 as our like our perspective character, it also seems like it's come out of nowhere for him, right?
It does, yeah. He's like, I don't know what's going on.
Yeah.
He's he's very clearly playing a number 6 that has been in the village long enough, and so realizes that sometimes things come out of nowhere like this.
Right.
But at the same time, he doesn't display any kind of familiarity or even tolerance for any of this kind of stuff. He's not outwardly hostile necessarily, but he's trying to figure out like, all right, what's the deal today? What's going on?
Yeah, this definitely seems to be a free-for-all, so he's not like the super angry, hostile number 6.
Sure.
But he's also like, he's not a social number 6, right?
He's hanging out by himself.
He's hanging out by himself, and so it's completely believable that like he just has no connection to the overall village community, and so because of that, this sort of could start up without him really paying attention.
Sure, he's not going out of his way to sign up for classes or social clubs. Certainly not.
Yeah. He doesn't have, a nice psychic coming by to keep him updated.
I feel like I had one other thing. Oh, I mentioned before, Vanilla Fielding is not on the announcement.
The cast list,
yeah. The person who is doing the announcements doesn't get a name, I think, but is basically like another new character that we kind of have to keep track of here. He'll show up again in a little bit.
Yeah. I was going to wait till we show up on screen to introduce him.
Sure. I'm just saying we get a lot of new stuff right away, right?
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
I completely agree. Like, this definitely could have used a reduction of characters pass.
Or at least like a consistency pass, right? Like,
yeah.
This almost feels like they did when Griefer was writing the thing, didn't have like a here's the people that currently exist in the village kind of sheet or something like that.
Sure. Yeah. That's fair. I mean, supposedly Patrick McGoohan, I think we've talked about this before, claims that he like wrote out basically what we would now consider like a series Bible for the village, right? Which says like, how do things work there, right? Like, what do they eat? How do they communicate, right? Etc.
Yeah, my feeling is that there's probably stuff that emerged from the first couple of episodes.
Yeah.
Like Fenella Fielding being the voice of the village. Like that seems like something that would very organically emerge in the first couple of episodes and then wouldn't get retrofitted back in the documentation.
That's fair.
I'm sure people didn't get hired on for, particularly for The Prisoner.
Totally.
People are not necessarily returning to these roles very often. I don't remember if we see more Fenella Fielding, as a matter of fact.
Oh, no. We'll hear her voice some more. Okay. I mean, we'll never see her. But it's interesting, right? Because there's other instances where they do have consistency in this episode, right? So like Peter Swanwick, our supervisor controller, our most common one, right? Number 28. He's here, right?
Yeah, that's true.
And this is even pretty clearly actual footage that they shot, right? As opposed to in previously, they've had to like edit in some stock footage of him just to put him in an episode. Anyway, a little messy, I agree. So from
that's
here,
that's the first scene.
Yeah, let's we can go a little bit faster here, right? So we get this whole bit of McGoohan going onto the beach where they've like grabbed the professor and they're like holding him bodily away. He finds the tape recorder, right? He listens to it for a little bit so he can hear the professor say, "You must destroy the general."
He doesn't say that though.
What does he say?
He just says, "This is a message from the professor." He doesn't get to hear the whole thing
yet.
In fact, he doesn't hear anything that would suggest that it's worth listening to the rest of it.
Right.
Except that it's been hidden, I guess. But we don't get any kind of tease.
Well, and that a weird, handsome young man just came up to talk to him and said, "This is important."
Sure.
The thing that I thought was interesting here is that like he gets this orange-shirted goon. There we go. I got there eventually. Who drives up and who's credited as the man in buggy. This is Michael Miller. He had some small parts in TV, Doctor Who, The Three Musketeers, etc. He drives up and they have this little like back and forth, which is like playing with this like school terms, right? Mm-hmm. And this is going to keep on coming up in this episode, right? Where people will just say randomly, "Good luck in your exams." Right, or best of luck in your exams.
Best of luck for your exams becomes the new "be seeing you" for this episode alone for some reason.
Right. I think, again, it's the education theme.
Sure.
But this is where it first comes up, right? And, like, there's this little back and forth about, like, number 6 is playing truant. Are you prefects? Mm-hmm. Right? This sort of thing. But the thing that I thought was really interesting in this scene is that Michael Miller's man in the buggy, who's clearly, like, a village warden goon, acts like he doesn't know who number 6 is.
He calls him Mister.
Right.
Yeah.
Which is wild, right?
It's insane to think anyone that is working for the village would know who number 6 is.
Yeah.
He's like the number one troublemaker.
And it's also like, especially for like a guard goon, right?
Right.
You figure they have like a list of these guys who are problems, right? But this is, I think, where I'm going to introduce one of my readings. And by the way, we never explicitly said it. Reading is this common term in like literary and media analysis, right? To say it's like an interpretive, understanding of a work.
Right.
But it's specifically acknowledging that like there's no true one interpretation of a work.
Yeah.
Anyway, I think there's a whole bunch of new people in the village. Like it's not just metatextual that we have a whole bunch of new actors and things like that. I think they brought in a whole bunch of people for this experiment.
Okay. So both prisoners and wardens.
Correct. Right. And I think number 12 is new because part of what my reading here is, because again, we talked about like 12 or we talked previously about numbers as roles. Right. And 12 previously was somebody, an agent brought in from outside the village for a particular task. right?
Mhm.
So that's my reading for this number 12 as well, that it's that same role, right?
So number
And
12 is almost like the role that is given to agents on assignment.
exactly, from outside, whatever this broader village organization is, they've been brought into the village. You're now the number 12 for this week.
Right.
Right. And so if that's true, I think it actually goes a fair way to explain some of the plot holes in this episode, right?
Sure.
Around things like, why doesn't this guy know who number 6 is, right? Or like, what's going on here?
Yeah, I could see. I will join you on this reading to see if this repairs some of the stuff that I'm that I find that glares out at me with its and you know what, I'm going to stop that description.
No, it's fine. You're saying repairs, and I think that's a good thing to note, right? Like, this is a reparative reading, right?
Yeah.
Which is, I'm going to come to this work and I'm going to say, okay, there's interesting ideas going on here. Is there a way I can make this make sense in my head?
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
Anyway.
While not, and this is part of what you were saying, but just to say it out loud.
Yeah, please.
To not say the things that don't work with the reading don't exist or
Right.
are are negligible because of the reading, but saying
Right.
like, if you take these things to be true, then you can still work with the material in a productive way, even if that's still even if that doesn't solve everything.
Yeah, it doesn't solve everything.
Yeah.
So we can return back. Number 6 gets a ride back to his house,
Yeah.
right? And here he watches TV.
He pours himself a nice iced glass of tomato juice.
Was it tomato juice? I didn't notice.
It's from a little red can.
Okay.
I'm
I
guessing it's like what we here in the States we have V8. You know
Yeah.
what but yeah, it's like Bloody Mary mix, just on its own.
Interesting. I think the script called for him to make tea, so that's very funny if it was just tomato juice.
Yeah.
That's what we got on. I don't know what to tell you. He has liquid, deal with it.
Yeah.
So it's at this point that we meet on screen 2 of the new characters,
Yes.
right? That we've already gestured at.
Neither of whom have names.
Well, yes, they both have roles, not names, which is interesting. And also the announcer, who's one of the 2, who is Al Mancini, whose full name is Alfred Benito Al Mancini. Great name.
Yep.
This
is the same guy that was on the intercom earlier that I was calling out.
Yes. It's interesting, right? Part of my reading around there's a whole bunch of new people, right? Is this announcer is also new, right? He's this like American voice announcer, which is, I think, supposed to indicate to us, again, like the internationality of the village, right? So he's been brought in from America for this particular role to like guide people through SpeedLearn, which I think is cool. Anyway, so he's this, Al Mancini is an American actor. He just had a whole bunch of like small bit parts, but he was in like Dirty Dozen, which is pretty fun. He was also the fish in Babe.
What?
Yeah, I know. It's like a bit part, but at one point Babe talks to a fish. Anyway, so he is briefly there to sort of introduce things, and then we get passed over to the professor's wife. That is her only credit. That is her only name. She doesn't get a number, which is...
To call that out even more, the announcer and the professor don't get numbers either.
Mm-hmm.
None of these people have numbers. There's
the announcer. The announcer does have a number. I just couldn't read it.
Oh, I see. Well, the professor doesn't have a number.
No. But it is interesting. I wanted to talk about this too, right?
Yeah.
Like professor's wife, professor, general. These are also roles.
They are.
But they're non-numbered roles, right?
Yes.
Which is, again, my whole thing about like, these are people being brought in from another system, right? This is a different way of dehumanizing people. I'm not suggesting there's like another village or anything out there, but like this is a different way. It is a novel way of talking about people in this show.
It is. It simply seems contrary to the way that the village's own internal logic works. So
It's
much
true.
so that it seems difficult to imagine that they would tolerate it in that way. And
Well,
so
I think part of
it's just to finish that thought, like
please.
if they are forced to tolerate it for some reason, or they are okay. No, I have 2 ideas now. One is that they are being forced to tolerate it for some reason,
Sure.
such as they only have access to this stuff if they use their associated groups terminology. Like they have to keep using, like you have to write this in C++ or we're not going to let you do it. And so you're forced to use C++ language in order to put it together or something like that, which suggests that they're like working with a associated but different evil spy organization that has access to this tech or something like that. I think that's a little bit far flung.
No, I don't think that's true.
I think the other thing that we could read here, if we take this to be true, that this is a different system that is being imposed with all this group of different people, is that this too is an experiment of what if we called people by proper nouns rather than calling them by numbers?
Oh, that's interesting. I thought you were going to go a different direction with that. I could see that.
What were you thinking?
My reading, right, so 2 even talks about this before, right? Like, the way that SpeedLearn works is not that it's a broadcast into your head, right? It's actually this broader thing that is in keeping with some of the other stuff we see the village wardens do in terms of, like, social engineering.
Right.
Right? So they have to have a kindly, old, trustworthy-seeming professor, right? And they call him the professor, not a number, because it's important that people view him as the professor, not as a number, right?
Yeah, it is implicit that it might even be explicit that the entire SpeedLearn process doesn't work if you don't have someone that your subjects view as a trustworthy source of knowledge to guide you through this process, even if they themselves are not where the information is coming from.
Exactly.
Almost as if you had a podcast host of some kind.
Yes. So this is my reading, right? Like, I think they have to be called the professor, the general, and then by extension, the professor's wife, because of this need of this one experiment. I don't think it's a separate experiment.
Right.
Anyway,
okay,
professor's wife.
Maybe this episode is good.
Yes, we're getting him, folks.
Tell me about the professor's wife.
So the professor's wife is played by Betty McDowell. She was an Australian actress. She had small parts in Australian stage, film, and TV. She was Mercedes in a County of Monte Cristo TV series in the 50s, which I thought was cool.
Yeah.
Her biggest role, unfortunately, was just the secretary in The Omen, so not particularly big roles here.
Right.
But I think she's a pretty dang good actress. She doesn't have any of the kind of weird put upon, like, damsel in distress sort of stuff that we get from other actresses on The Prisoner. While you might disagree with me, I do think that she has like a clear motivation, and that her story in this episode, I think, works, at least for me. Yeah. But you made faces. Tell me what.
I think she does the best that she can with some pretty lean material, if I'm being honest. Sure. Part of that is a product of its times. Part of that is just not really the focus in a big way, although
sure.
I can say more about that as we see more of her, I think.
Totally.
I think she does a fine job. I just don't know if she needed to be here.
Oh, that's fair. So they, there's this little bit where she's...
I would have liked for her to have had some other name that was not just the professor's wife. I think that says a lot about what this show regards her as, right?
Oh, no, it doesn't treat her well. The script, by the way, only describes her as where was it? I put it in a different place. Here it is. Attractive woman of about 35.
Yeah.
Which is, kind of worrying, especially because there's a big age difference that's being suggested here.
Yeah, there is.
Between the professor and the wife. Anyway, she vamps. She's basically here to vamp. This is the first time we get mention of her seminar. This extracurricular studies that are mentioned. Mm-hmm. That'll come up again later.
Yeah, the entire reason she's there is the professor is like finishing his notes for the seminar, I guess.
No, I mean, we know why, right?
Well, sure.
It's because he got mobbed.
Yeah.
And he's in the process of being brainwashed, so he'll do it again.
Right.
He's got a lamp hanging down above his head, and it's brainwashing him right now.
Yeah, more about that later.
So the throw line, right? The announcer says, he interrupts her, right? How much she doesn't matter to the village and to this script.
Yep.
And says like, sorry, Madame Professor, I don't care about that. We're going to go to SpeedLearn now. Best of luck in your exams.
Right.
And like, that's the throw line. You're right. It is the be seeing you. And then we get the introduction to SpeedLearn from the professor.
Yes.
I was confused about what was going on because they kept saying earlier, I don't know if you noticed, it was like, it's a 3-year course in 3 minutes.
They throw a lot of time frames around in this episode. Yeah.
But what happened here, right, is that we learned from this scene that this one lesson is a 15 seconds of one course.
Right.
Right? So it's actually 12 courses, which would make sense in terms of a 3-year degree.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah. This scene is the professor basically talking through like why this revolutionary technique is so important and why not how it works, but how it's going to change your life.
Yeah.
It has the feel of, and I don't know if these existed contemporaneously. And so I don't know if this is what it's deliberately invoking, but as someone that watched a lot of TV in the 80s, it had the feel of when you stay up late and you start getting not quite infomercials, but like advertisements for things that are like buy a encyclopedia or something like that.
Yeah, you have someone, totally.
I guess sort of infomercial kind of stuff where it's like,
very much
here's a subject matter expert who is trying to sell you on this thing. If you buy this thing for 6 payments of $200 or whatever, then it will revolutionize the way that you think about milk.
Right. And you know, some of the things that he says here are not about milk, but they are about like, you know, this has made me like the dodo. Right.
I would like to say a brief word about SpeedLearn. It is quite simply the most important, most far-reaching, most beneficent development in mass education since the beginning of time. A marriage of science and mass communication, which results in the abolition of years of tedious and wasteful schooling. A 3-year course indelibly impressed upon the mind in 3 minutes. Impossible? That's what I said, until I was introduced to the general. And then I realized that not only was it possible, but that education was ready for a giant leap forward from the Dark Ages into the 20th and 21st centuries. Ladies and gentlemen, I have been a teacher for 30 years. SpeedLearn has made me as obsolete as the dodo.
And we're going to prove it. Subject of tonight's lecture.
So this is Peter Howell here. He was a World War II vet. He was a West End radio and film actor. He was in Avengers, Doctor Who. He was best known for playing a doctor in Emergency Ward 10. And what I think is interesting is this gives us our first like real pitch of what the heck SpeedLearn is.
Yep.
Right. And SpeedLearn is at the time and maybe still more commonly referred to or could be thought of as a synonym for rote learning. Right. Which is like, if you've ever done anything with like flashcards, right, where you're just like memorizing multiplication tables or like memorizing facts and figures, right? Like this is this style of learning, which at this time, contemporaneous with this episode, was becoming really popular in school systems.
Right.
And so
a form of learning by basically connecting to things rather than understanding the linkage between them.
Yeah, it's memorization learning as opposed to understanding learning, right? And this was being lauded with very similar language, right? In terms of, hey, we can like, you know, we can mass produce students. We can mass produce knowledge in this way cheaply and easily and fast, right? And so it's here where we're actually getting, you know, some actual meat of themes in this episode. Where it goes with that, we shall see.
Right.
Then we get the SpeedLearn sequence. What'd you think of this sequence?
This kicks ass.
Yeah.
This rules. It is this bizarre 45-second sequence. So number 6 has turned this on to see what's going on and finds he cannot look away from his television set.
Yep.
And the scene of the professor speaking live to us has been replaced with that same black and white anxious picture of the professor. And it zooms in on his eyes, and then it zooms in on one pupil. And there is some sort of ray, there is some sort of light at the center of the thing. Beaming information, putting creases into number 6's brain that weren't there before that tell him things about Otto von Bismarck.
Mm-hmm.
It's cool.
It's really cool.
It looks really cool.
Good. Yeah, I this is one of the things that I'm most impressed by in this episode. I have not hidden the fact that I really like sort of surreal films and, shorts generally. And I think this does a really good job of feeling nothing like anything else we see in The Prisoner. The light effect is actually kind of, at least similar in probably how they achieved it to some of the other lighting effects that we've seen, like this beam you're talking about.
Right.
I suspect that's similar to how they do like the Blue Eye Throne beam, right?
Yeah, beam is wrong. We never actually see a beam of light. We're looking head on as if we are in number 6's vision, basically. And so there's basically like some sort of central light emitting from the very center. It's almost like as if some other technological mechanism is overriding the rods in the TV or something like that. It's very, like you say, it's very, very well done, and it doesn't feel like anything we've seen before. But it does feel of a kind. It feels like the other super science that they have access to.
That's true, but it is distinct, and I think that's really cool to achieve. And this is like fully in the script, right? So it's pretty rad that they were just able to like directly do this. It totally works as a sequence. I like it a lot.
Right, and they don't. It doesn't rely on there being a special antenna on the TV or anything like that, right? It's just a broadcast. It just works.
And then we sort of come back, right? Number 6 has dropped his mug of tomato juice or whatever.
Yep.
And the announcer says, congratulations on another successful session. Address questions to the general, which is interesting, at the Speed Learn Town Hall. So there's this idea of like, everybody's going to go to this town hall if they have other questions they want to ask, and that will be like sent to the general, who will then like, respond with these questions.
Presumably answer them, yeah.
Presumably.
Not to the professor.
No, definitely not.
Yeah. Definitely don't ask the professor anything. Definitely don't chase him down and tackle him on a beach.
I mean, I think actually they do want you to do that.
Yeah,
just
that's a good point.
to him.
Yeah. Don't listen to anything that he has to say.
There it is. And it's here, finally, where our favorite milk boy, Colin Gordon, re-enters the scene.
Walking in like the high school tough. Here to razz you and take your lunch money away. We've previously seen Colin Gordon as the deeply anxious, deeply fretful number 2 of A, B, and C. Right. Here he's got some swagger.
Yeah, he is 100% confident.
He is in control, and he's here to... Number 6 is cleaning up the tomato juice, and he sweeps in... He might as well be snapping to his theme song. As he says, mopping up operations number 6. And he smiles,
a lot of...
because he knows it's good. He knows it was a good line. It is good.
He's got a number of fun lines in this episode.
Yeah. If anything makes this episode work, it's Colin Gordon as number 2. He's really just terrific.
Yeah, you can really see his like Pink Panther comedy chops in this episode.
Totally.
But also, like, again, West End actor. He's great. Yeah. Colin Gordon's fantastic. I mean, we talked about it before, right? The episodes are out of order. I wonder where all this confidence going to go. I guess we'll find out.
The one thing I really, really wish that we had at the end of the day was a third episode with him as number 2, like a trifecta of him doing super science stuff where he starts off here super confident, and then things start to go bad, and then we end with A, B, and C where he's like, at his limits.
Yeah. I would almost want it the other way. I would love a immediately post A, B, and C episode. Like, they never do this in The Prisoner.
Sure.
But what if there was an episode that picked up directly after A, B, and C, and it's Colin Gordon's number 2 going to number 6 saying, you have to help me escape. That would be incredible. Imagine the buddy cop like episode of 6 and 2, Colin Gordon's 2 working together. Delicious.
I think that, well, now I'm just fanficking up new episodes because
it's true.
I feel like where he's at here and where he's at the beginning of A, B, and C, I feel like there's a bigger gulf there. Like there's such a distance between like, well, that experiment didn't work, and oh my God, I have to get these secrets out. And that's the other thing is like, A, B, and C, he's very wrapped up in. All right, I have to find out why he resigned.
Okay.
Nothing in this episode is about number 6.
Oh no, for sure.
Nothing is about, like, he has given lip service to the idea of, I want to escape, and so I'm going to do this because number 12 might help me escape, or the professor might help me escape. That doesn't happen. It barely comes up in the back half of this episode. And certainly no one wonders, why did you resign? No efforts are made to try and get this from him or anything like that.
Right.
Despite, as number 2 is about to demonstrate, the ability to make him say whatever he wants. Not quite whatever he wants, you know what I mean?
Nah, not quite. So it's really interesting you say that, because to me, particularly the, like, we'll get to it later, but the really great why back and forth at the end, the hints that we've gotten about the general previously makes me think that, like, what number 6 accomplishes at the end in destroying the general is like a much bigger blow to this organization than we are given time for it to feel like at the end of the episode. And so I totally buy that, like, this Colin Gordon number 2 goes from the failure with the general into, oh God, I have to produce results now for my masters.
So do you think this general is explicitly the general from the referenced at the end of The Schizoid Man?
I think is the simplest explanation.
That would explain why that number 2 was like, report to the general. That's a very curious thing to say.
Exactly.
Right.
I think it fits really quite nicely, actually.
Mm-hmm.
Let's get to it when we get to it, because this is such a good scene. I do want to actually give it its due.
Yes, please.
So this is number 2 comes in along with another person who does have a number badge, but I couldn't read it, with a metal detector.
Right.
And is going through, and they're trying to find, number 2 says explicitly that they're trying to find the professor's notes, right? This tape recorder that we know number 6 found and buried on the beach.
Yeah, they're really keen to get it.
Yeah. Number 6 gestures that, like, he might want to try the closet, basically. In the script, it's a slightly different thing of, like, oh, do you mean the one that I have in my other jacket or something like that? Just a bit of fun to throw him off the chase. But there's this really interesting back and forth. You already gestured at it, where number 2 says, are you still keen to leave us? Right?
Right.
Number 6 gives this non-committal answer. And number 2 says that if they get the notes back, that they'll see about giving him his freedom, which is wild, right?
Sure.
Like, who knows if this deal is even a little bit legitimate?
I can't
right?
imagine that it is.
No, certainly not. But, like, even that they would make this sort of bargain, and he makes it so flippantly, right?
I mean, the flippantness with which he makes the offer is maybe what caused me to dismiss it more than you did, because it's so out of hat. It's so, like, there's no world in which I can imagine that that's true, and certainly I can't imagine that number 6 thinks it's true.
Sure, I don't think that he thinks it's true, but what's really interesting, right? And I talked about this at the end of the last episode, right?
Right.
Like, we're going to talk about it more, and I think that, like, I read the bit about the number 6 escaping threat in this episode disappearing as intentional.
Sure.
Where a different version of number 6, an earlier number 6, might have said, oh, you're going to give me my way out. I want some details, right?
Right.
Because you can imagine, even if the offer isn't real,
then he might fish for things.
Exactly. Or he might learn bits and pieces that could be used in a real escape attempt.
Right.
Here, there's no interest here.
No, there's very little from number 6 here in terms of needling number 2 in the hopes that he slips up.
Exactly, right?
Yeah.
I want to keep pulling at this thread, but just note this for now.
Yeah.
So they leave with that scene. That night...
Well, wait.
Sorry, go ahead.
Just to call it out, we're talking about, what...
Oh, yeah, this great scene.
Yeah,
Sorry, you're right.
What it is that SpeedLearn actually does.
Yep.
Number 2 just asks, like, a history question. I'll drop it in here because, it's performed so well. But he drops a particular, like a trivia question, basically. And
Number 6, the Battle of Adrianople.
Yeah, and number 6 answers before realizing that he's given the answer. And he's kind of confused as to why he's given this answer and why so readily.
History is not my subject.
Isn't it? When was the Treaty of Adrianople?
September 1829.
What happened in 1830?
Greek independence was assured and guaranteed.
By whom?
Russia, France, Britain.
Who is Bismarck's ally against Danish Prince Christian of Glucksburg?
Frederick of Augsburg. He, like the German Bundestag, had never accepted the Treaty of London in 1852. Bismarck wanted war, but he wanted it waged by Prussia and Austria in alliance and not by the whole German Bund. He realized that a successful war against the Danes in 1864 would serve the same purpose as Cavour of Italy's entrance into the Crimean War, namely that it would indicate future leadership and would at the same time raise Prussia's prestige.
Just demonstrating the power of this thing to basically produce results in the people that are subjected to speed learn. And very, very quickly, number 6 realizes, he calls up the operator basically to like confirm these answers to see if this is indeed true. And not only is it true, but the operator is giving the exact same answers word for word. Demonstrating that it is not understanding of history, it is repetition of facts, or as you or I or number 6 might understand, repetition of the facts as reported by a certain source.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Number
6
I think
hates Wikipedia.
He does hate Wikipedia. I think the last thing you said, though, about it's not understanding, I think we don't know that yet, right? If we're thinking about it ourselves critically for a moment, we could get there, right?
But the episode doesn't take the time to illustrate it until just a little bit later.
Right. So you could imagine at this moment, it's like, oh, wow, this is real, right?
Sure.
Like, you really gained all this knowledge. You really gained all this understanding. This is incredible.
His head's going to swell up like a Superman villain.
Exactly. He's Megamind now. No escape, Megamind meme. Anyway, so you're totally right. This is a great scene. It's really important that we mention it. It really is demonstrating of why speed learn is interesting. And it's part of why this episode works at all, right? Because otherwise speed learn is like this really vague concept. So to have this like moment of like real fear and confusion from number 6 is, I think, crucial to the audience actually caring at all about what's going on here.
Yeah, the visuals of speed learn happening and then this eerie repetition in lockstep, I think, sells the idea of like, okay, there's a hook to whatever is going on.
Yes. The next bit we get is we actually get a shot of number 6 like pacing back and forth in his house, right? His unit, his residence, as like we get this announcement of like it's about to be curfew, right? And so there's this real sense that he's like considering something,
right?
I don't know what he's considering here, whether to go back for the tape, I guess, like whether it's even worth it to go back for the tape. But he ends up deciding, yes, I'm going to go back for the tape.
Right.
I want to call that out here because I want to return back to what was he considering later.
Sure.
He goes back to try to find the tape. He doesn't find the tape where he buried it. What he does find...
He finds a gay guy on the beach.
Well, in a bush,
he finds...
right? Like,
look, yeah.
It's a stereotype. It is what it is.
Yeah.
It's 2 guys in a bush. Past curfew.
I've seen Angels in America. I know what's up.
Anyway.
Roy Cohn is not trapped in the village.
So 6 finds 12 in the bush. He grabs him out of the bush. 12 hands him his, quote, passport, right?
To get out, supposedly.
Supposedly, because 12 supposedly somehow knows about the offer that 2 was going to make 6. Which is interesting.
Yes.
And again, something I want to return to later.
The passport being the excavated recorder with the prisoner's tape inside of it.
Right. So 12, right, gets into this, like, you know, who do you trust thing? And 6 says, I trust myself. And 12 says, join the club.
Yeah. Interesting.
Really interesting.
Yeah.
So we get this clear sense that, like, 12, for some reason, is aligning himself with 6. But regardless, this scene, that's basically all the important stuff in this scene. We get some little hints of, like, except for one thing. Go ahead.
This is where it is demonstrated that this is rote memorization and not understanding, because he asks, when was something, not what was something.
Yes.
Number 6 responds with the what, and number 12 says, that's not what I asked. All you're doing is repeating things you've memorized.
Right. And I think it is in this scene that 6 commits to doing the thing, right? We end the scene with him listening to the tape. Finally, he gets this, like, you must destroy the general, right?
Right. This is the entreaty from the professor. If you want to be free, you must destroy the general. Not kill the general, not get rid of the general. Destroy the general.
Yes. And I think that we do see Six committing to this in this scene, right? Like, and it's interesting in terms of thinking about why does he commit here, right? In the very last episode, we got this whole thing about, like, he's very protective, he's very territorial of his identity and things like that, right? And they have literally placed facts in his mind. So you could say, like, oh, this is like retribution for that.
Sure.
That he's going to, like, take down this organization,
Yeah.
right? But there's all this bits, even in this scene with saying it's his passport, of them offering him off-ramps, right? Of offering him, like, it doesn't matter what's happening here in the village. Like, escape is being brought up. It's not going to get brought up again, right?
Not past this point, no.
I mean, we get this thing about,
yeah.
the deal is off, right, later.
Right.
But, like, escape is no longer on the menu after this scene, is really what I should say, right?
So it's certainly not his priority.
Right.
Or it is not a priority, period. Right?
Right. And I think that's really interesting, right?
Mhm.
Because you can imagine a different version of this episode where Six gets this tape recorder, hears there's weird stuff happening in the village, and says, well, that has nothing to do with me. Bye. I'm going to work on an escape plan.
Right. Whether that is giving it to number 2 in the hopes of making a deal, or working with the professor and saying, hey, I've heard you can get me out of here.
Yep. Or with number 12, who seems to like him for some reason.
Yep.
Right? Like, and the fascinating thing is, like, compare this to the very first episode, right? In the very first episode, in Arrival, we see him see the weird nonsense experiments they're doing in the village, right? We see him...
Doesn't want any part of it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like, he does not care. He's like, okay, well, that's cool, bye.
Yeah.
Anyway.
These are cabbages. You are all cabbages, and I don't want to have anything to do with you above and beyond getting myself out of here.
Right. So something has changed in this man, right? Timeline stuff is all wibbly wobbly, who knows, right? But from Arrival to here, this Six has changed in such a way that he's no longer, escape is not the primary concern anymore. It's changed. I don't know exactly what his concern is. I have some thoughts about what his primary concern is. But I think we can talk about it again at the end of the episode. But I wanted to call out here that, like, this is the end of escape being even possibly what this episode's going to be about.
Certainly this episode. I'll be curious to see how it shakes out for the rest of the episodes that follow.
There's a real fascinating next episode on that exact point, but we'll talk about that more later.
Can't wait.
Anyway, so we now move on. We actually get some, like, behind the curtains, secret back rooms, evildoer stuff here, which is fun.
Yeah. Yeah.
You like it?
No, it's different.
So we sometimes get scenes like this where we, like, return to 2 in the Green Dome, right? This is a classic style of this sort of scene, right? But typically we do that because 2 is about to put, like, number 6 up on the big screen, up on the lava lamp screen, right? There's none of that in this episode.
Let me show you how I'm going to get him this time.
Exactly. But in this case, we're just getting the background of, like, preparations for this big experiment, right? This is the first time we're hearing about it as an experiment.
Yeah, they are concerned with number 6 mostly in terms of, let's make sure this guy doesn't screw up what we're actually concerned with.
Yeah.
Which seems to be whatever this thing is.
Yeah. And I think this is especially interesting following the last episode, right? Where we talked about, like, as far as they're concerned, for a bit, they think 6 is dead. And it's like they're full steam ahead. They're just doing other stuff.
Right.
This is an example of what that other stuff is.
Yeah.
Right? Anyway, this is also, we get the blue throne. I want to call it out every time we see it. The blue-eyed throne's in the background.
Why is it? This is number 2's office, isn't it?
I think it's actually, I mean, it's the same set, which is confusing.
Sure.
Right? But I think it's the local council set. It's supposed to be.
Okay, so they're supposed to be in the council room.
Right. Because that's where the blue throne is.
Right, at town hall.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
That's my... who knows, right?
Sure.
This could just be, like, quick set dressing thing. They still had the blue thrown up from last time.
Sometimes you have a quick stand-up that you need to do. You need to find a room. You're looking for a place that's got a whiteboard. Oh, the throne room has a whiteboard. There's no one in there right now. Let's just jump in there.
Yep.
Yeah.
And we do get him drinking milk. Very important.
In like the only Angelo thing that happens this entire episode is him bringing Colin Gordon a glass of milk.
I mean, but thank goodness, because otherwise we could make arguments. This is a completely different character.
We could. And yet.
But we know it's our milk boy.
It's true.
And 12 comes in, right?
12 does come in.
And 12's bit in this scene is really interesting to me because he directly critiques the professor.
He does. He's like immediately like, hey, this doesn't seem like a great plan.
Right. Because it's reliant on the professor, who's like a wild card, basically.
Right.
Right? He might run off onto the beach again.
Yeah. Number 2 asks, how long have you been with us? And number 12 says, quite a while. And number 2 says, but clearly not long enough.
Yeah, that's really interesting.
Yeah. So this is someone that has some history with whatever this organization is, but is junior enough that number 2 feels confident in being able to reprimand him.
Yes, true. But also, maybe 2 is wrong here.
Yeah,
because
absolutely.
It does seem like there's some issues.
Yeah, this is a bad plan.
It's a bad plan.
Like, they've got some great tech that is propped up with some very, very shaky pillars here.
Yeah. 100%. Who's been in an organization with great tech and shaky people? Not I. Anyway. I'm
making a face.
So, yeah. That was just for me, but now it's for everyone.
Yeah.
So next we get the...
It's time for art.
It's time for The Prisoner Hates Modern Art again.
Boy. If ever you needed a TV show where you could just set up a bunch of straw men to knock over.
Yes. Not since Chimes of Big Ben have we seen such disdain for modern art.
Such disdain. We're in like a little garden. People are sketching on pads. They're reading books. They're relaxing in this sort of like idyllic kind of just sort of cafe kind of space. And the prisoner's wife is here and she's looking at what everyone's doing, giving them some compliments or perhaps some suggestions about their technique and so on and so forth. And number 6 is here. And he's gonna take down these libs one by one.
What's interesting, right, is that like rather than number 2 back in the number 2 scene bringing up number 6 on the lava lamp, he brings up this extra curriculum seminar thing, right? And it just so happens that 6 happens to be there.
Yeah.
Which is a surprise.
Yeah.
They didn't know he was going to be here. They're not tracking him in this episode in the same way. And, this is where the professor's wife, really wish we had a better name for this lady. So sorry.
They should make a prisoner's wife.
If the prisoner's so good, why didn't they give him a wife?
Yeah, seriously. Dang, that'd actually be a great concept for an episode, though.
Brendan? I don't know. I'm not going to say anything more. Anyway, more on that later. So, Professor's wife comes up to number 6. She questions him. He questions her about what's going on. There's all these silly little, isn't modern art, aren't those stupid things they learn at university so useless, right? Like,
finding things a bit strange.
That is the trouble. I can't find anything at all.
What exactly are you looking for?
What are we all looking for?
Well, let's see. That gentleman over there. What do you think he's doing?
Tearing up a book.
He's creating a fresh concept. Construction arises out of the ashes of destruction. And that woman?
Standing on her head.
She's developing new perspective.
Really? Him?
He's asleep. One learns only when the mind wants to, not at set times.
Is that what your husband believes?
It's self-evident, surely. What's your subject?
What's yours?
Mine. Modern art.
Really?
And then we get what number 6 has been drawing this whole time, and it's actually a really lovely, like, number 6 is quite an artist. We didn't know this.
Evidently, yeah. It's a portrait of the wife in a general's uniform.
Yes. Because he thinks that she's the general and that he has to destroy her.
Yeah.
Which is a reasonable thing to think at this point.
Sure. It's, if I was trying to figure this out, this is maybe something I would try to do first.
But it is also interesting that this is giving this actress, or this character, more credit than the script is actually giving her, right? Like Patrick McGowan for once is like, you know what? I bet there's a powerful woman behind this.
Yes, I think that's a good. I mean, the way that she has just engaged with all of his questions about art, I wonder if there's not a. I view this as less a compliment to she's the one that's really in charge in the same way that we saw the real number 2 in Free for All.
Sure. Yeah. Number 56, 58.
Yeah. I think of this more as the general is also a straw man, because all of the things that you're saying are very silly and aren't worth any real credence. And so the existence of the general is just another empty straw man set up by the village in order to produce these results, which is actually true in a way. It's just not the professor's wife.
No, totally. And to be clear, right, I wasn't saying that like this is a positive on women episode. I do not think that's true at all.
Like she, unfortunately, like I think she's a perfectly fine actress. Unfortunately, her role is pretty much like shrew the entire time.
Totally. My point here was more is that it's almost out of character for number 6 to like think that there's actually secretly a powerful woman in charge.
Sure.
Except maybe if we do think about this as being after Free for All, and he's like, they won't get me with that trick twice. Anyway, there's one interesting cut bit from the script here, which is number 6, like, steals away and sneaks into like their mansion or whatever. They have like this palatial state. It's quite nice. And the guy who was sleeping was supposed to wake up and report that. Like that he was fake sleeping. Like he's an agent.
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah. Which like they just get it more neatly with like number 2 watching the whole thing the whole time by coincidence. But it's a fun little bit that they cut.
Sure.
Anyway, number 6 explores their in Dior mansion, where he finds a whole bunch of sculptures of famous people and of people in the village, right?
Yeah.
Including himself.
To the professor's wife's anger. She discovers him. He starts pulling these cloth off of the busts of these people from history, but then people from the village. Number 2 is there. Do you see who also is there?
No, who do you mean?
There's a bust of Leo McKern.
Oh, whoa! I did not notice.
Yeah. I think I have a picture of it somewhere. I'll drop it into our chat.
Once again, very impressed with the art direction.
I assume that this is a leftover from the art competition in Chimes of Big Ben.
That makes sense.
But the fact that they thought to include it, I thought was very, very nice.
That is nice. That's good.
Yeah.
There's this little back and forth where the professor's wife reveals that she doesn't think of herself as a prisoner, right? That they came here willingly.
Right.
And I believe her that they initially did come here willingly, but it's pretty darn clear now that is no longer the case. They are not being held here willingly. Oh yeah, look at that. It's Liam McKern.
That's
fun
him.
To see him. And that is cool now, right? Like, because there is some continuity. We can make an argument about this being post Chimes of Big Ben.
Right.
Which is cool. Then there's this bizarre scene. 2 shows up because he watched 6 go in the house.
Yep.
And 6 bursts into the professor's sleeping quarters. He has like, I don't know, what is it he's holding? He's like a cudgel or something.
It's like a walking cane or something like that.
Yeah. And he uses it to smack the prisoner on the head. There's a scream.
In the face.
And then it turns out that this is another sculpture. We learned this is actually by the professor's wife, right? 6 is a funny line where he says, "Oh, he's gone to pieces." Silly.
That's right.
And 2 says, "I'm sorry about your masterpiece, my dear." And they wander off. Who is this for?
I was going to ask you the exact same thing. I don't know why this effigy exists.
Yeah.
I've been trying, we've said reparative reading. Maybe this is the only thing that I can put together.
Yeah.
Maybe because of the professor's escape attempt, they are keeping him in much more confined, Like
Quarters, sure.
he's been confined to the labyrinth where he does his work now.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
for
yeah.
whatever reason, they've decided he has to have a physical presence here in his mansion in case students come to visit. Or
Sure, that would make sense.
if someone does something like what number 6 is doing, is like, I'm just going to ask him one thing. I'm going to sneak in there. They have to have him in there sleeping.
Yeah.
Like the doctor's
Sure.
there supposedly administering to him, right?
Right.
And so they need an exact duplicate of him in his bed sleeping, I guess.
Yeah.
I saw an interview with Peter Howell describing when they made this that he actually had a little tiny claustrophobia attack when they were like putting like the wax mold over him to exactly create his face. Yeah.
Yeah, it's weird. It's weird. I think that your reason is as good as any in terms of what it's doing here. I think it's mostly here because, the writer, Louis Grafer, thought it was clever.
I think he's wrong to think that because it doesn't do anything.
It doesn't do anything.
Yeah.
It's functionless.
Yeah, there's no like even with that, there's no conclusion that number 6 draws out of this that leads him to another piece of action. It doesn't set the village back in any way. It effectively produces nothing.
Yes. Yeah. We learn in this scene, I guess, she's probably not the general. And that's about it.
We learned that from the previous scene in the garden.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe it's that like it's not here, right? This is a dead end, is maybe what we're learning.
Sure.
But
yes,
like
that is true. We learned that wherever the professor is, it is not here. And so number 6 will have to go somewhere else to get to the bottom of everything.
Yeah, but of course that leads to nothing because 12's just going to show up and tell him where to go.
Right.
Anyway, now there's a party scene.
Okay.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Okay. I'm being generous. I'm trying to.
Okay.
I'm the most generous person in the world.
That's true.
Number 12 wouldn't have known that he needed to give number 6 that help if number 2 and the village administration didn't realize, oh, number 6 is poking around there. Let's go get him out of there before he causes too much trouble.
That's fair.
Yeah.
That's fair. Yeah, there's more reasoning here than maybe I was giving it credit for.
Is it Halloween? Is that what we're to take from this? Everyone's partying. Everyone's kissing. Everyone's having sex.
I don't think that's true.
They're dressed as monsters. People have jack-o'-lantern masks.
Yeah.
Regardless of what time of year it is definitely trying to evoke some sort of a like monster mash sort of holiday. Whether that's Halloween or Mardi Gras or Michaelmas, I have no idea.
Yeah. So this party scene is just not in the script and completely not in the script.
Okay.
We have this announcer on the street, like interviewing people. And by interviewing, I just mean that he's going up to them and saying the same questions we've heard before.
Yeah.
And they're giving the same answers, right? I have a couple thoughts on this scene. One is it's possible this is some British thing that we just don't know, which is like pre-exams, because they keep talking about there's going to be exams coming up or whatever.
Right.
Pre-exams, there might be like some party or celebration right before you're like studying for exams. So that's one possibility. We're just stupid Americans who don't know better.
I mean, I am stupid.
No, that's not true. Another possibility, though, option 2, is that this is supposed to demonstrate the free time that SpeedLearn gives you. Because SpeedLearn is going to free up that time you otherwise would have had to spend studying.
Wasted time spent studying and doing homework.
Yeah. Instead, now you can party.
Yeah.
Or people are so excited about SpeedLearn, they just had a spontaneous party.
They just love it.
I don't know. It's bizarre. But I do think that it feeds into this broader like feeling of sort of grounded surreality that exists in this episode, right? Where there's just suddenly there's a party with no warning.
Sure. Again, lots of young people.
Mm-hmm.
Some of them have signs.
Yeah.
Hang on, I'm bringing it up now.
Yeah, they're just some fun stuff about learning and such and such. Let's see here. Yeah, I don't know if I can see any of these signs. Oh no, here we go. No homework with speed learn.
No
Yeah, so maybe
homework
that
with
is
speed
it.
learn.
No homework with speed learn. They're holding some of the
It
posters
is
that just have
possible.
like
It works.
yeah. So maybe that's it, right? Like they just have all this free time and so they're having a costume party in the streets like you do.
This is almost like a flash mob.
A little bit, yeah.
And like most flash mobs, they're probably paid.
Yes,
They were probably told, "Hey, we'll give you 50 work credits if you go out into the streets and do this."
If you seem really excited. I mean, they did establish earlier that they're only at like 72% attendance or something
That's
like
true, yeah.
that. So maybe they're really trying to be like, okay, how do we get those last 28%? We're gonna figure this out. Oh, party in the streets, obviously.
Yeah, University for All in 3 minutes.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry, 72.4% enrollment. Somebody's gonna get mad at me for that.
There's, we've already gestured at why this is probably a bad idea and why people would position this as a bad idea, but it is interesting how they are positioning it almost as like, oh, we're making education more accessible by just beaming it into your head, right? You don't have to do any of the hard work. We're going to do all of that for you and just give you the answers right away so that you will know everything that you need to know in order to be as smart as everyone else.
Oh, you know what? I'm completely wrong. This is in the script. And we have, in fact, the posters in the script.
Huh.
Speed learn, it's more than possible. It works. No more schools, quote, the general. It can be done. Trust me, photo the professor. University for all in 3 minutes, et cetera, et cetera. The script even specifically calls out, this is fun. It specifically calls out a fair proportion are long-haired and bearded.
Yeah.
As you've noted earlier.
University students. Weird hippies.
University students, yeah.
Reefers.
Nowhere in here does it say that they're in costumes, but it does say that some are like have hanging lanterns, so I don't know. Somebody just thought we'd put them in costumes as well. Who knows? Anyway, the important thing that's here is that number 12 can stare at number 6 across the party.
Boy, can he.
And this leads to one of my favorite little bits in the episode. Do you not like this bit?
No, it's great. I'm waiting for you to describe two men whispering over a candle to me.
Look, but the thing that's really cool in this episode, right, or in this sequence, is that number 6 gets into his place and like immediately there's some electrical problem. Right? Immediately he gets a call telling him to like stay in place, that there's like there's cans or you will find candles for such an emergency, upper kitchen cabinet second right?
Yep.
So they immediately know there's a problem. They immediately let him know you can find some candles here. We do a quick cut and we get a mechanic arriving, right? To supposedly deal with this. The mechanic, I should say, is Norman Mitchell, who was also in Pink Panther Strikes Again, a bunch of cops in film and TV. He doesn't really get much to do in this scene, but he's a comedy actor. And then number 12 shows up, but he shows up so that he has like a flashlight on his 6, so you can't see his face at first, right?
Yeah, it's really well lit.
12 is seeming to be playing the part of a village warden here.
Right, he's accusing number 6 of having caused this power outage.
Of sabotage, right?
Yeah.
That's punishable. And then they get up close, and yes, there's two men whispering to each other over candlelight.
I'm going to punish you.
Look, so...
I've seen angels in America.
So number 12 mentions they have 15 seconds. And I think this scene is crucial in terms of everything that we've been talking about so far, right?
Just to sum up your work.
Son, listen carefully. We have about 15 seconds. The professor's real lecture, the one you heard on the tape recorder. Would you like it to go out?
I might.
Take it. In the ink cylinder. Micro. Be careful.
How?
The base. Buses.
When?
Tomorrow.
Where?
I'll fix it. I'll fix it, number 6, so that you become aware that
Deliberate destruction of official property is a most serious offense.
He's asking 6, do you want this to happen?
Right.
Where else have we gotten is that an order number 6, right? I'm connecting more red lines between more pieces.
I mean, that could be the case. I think maybe you could also read this as he arrived here in the village already kind of feeling like he wanted to disrupt this experiment from the beginning, and has identified in number 6 a weapon he can use to bring about his own ends.
Brennan, that is exactly my reading of what's going on with number 12.
Okay, good.
All the stuff that all the like fan stuff that I've ever seen about this episode is convinced that number 12 is like a real ally of number 6.
Sure.
I don't think that's true at all. I think number 12 was sent to the village to destroy this experiment.
Oh, interesting.
That's my read on what's going on here. This is why number 12 is kind of like a weird outside actor. It's unclear how the ranking works between 2 and 12 here.
Sure.
There's a real sense that he's been brought in as part of this experiment.
Right. He seems to be like we'll get to it in a little bit, but in a little while, he is describing to other people what this is and why it's working. So he seems to be a source of authority, at least in terms of like, he's like the producer of the thing that's being put on, right? He's the one that is making it all go, even if he's not responsible for the technology or the learning itself.
Right.
The idea that he's been sent here to destroy it is interesting. So you think there's some other authority that wants this to go bad?
Yes.
Okay, cool.
I can't talk about why yet.
Okay, cool.
We'll get to it later. This is again more me signposting things to talk about.
Sure.
Some later in this episode and some very far from now.
Got it.
You know, there's this little bit 12 gives 6. It's like a bureau pen or something like that, right? And it has like a secret cylinder in it.
Right.
And he also hands him these 2 metal discs, right? In terms of being able to get in. He talks about it that it's tomorrow.
Yep.
And 6 asks where, and then the power comes back on. Right? Which means the recording things are back on. And so 12 just goes, I'll fix it. And Mechanic says, all in order, sir. 12 says, I'll fix it, number 6, that you become aware that deliberate destruction of official property is a most serious offense. I must recommend the full penalty. 6 says, which is, 12 says, it could be imprisonment. It could be a fine. 6 says, I'll take the fine. Which is very funny. Yeah. There's a couple of good lines in this episode.
Yeah, totally.
And then number 12, with a faint smile, says, yes, I thought you might. Report to my office and administration tomorrow morning.
Slick.
So he's given that information. It's a good scene.
It is.
This might be the best written, best acted, best lit little scene in this whole episode.
It's good. I said before, the director didn't really have much to say other than the actors really carry this episode. He's right. The actors really carry this episode. He's right.
Totally.
Yeah.
I mean, but you know, that's all in the script, right?
Sure.
So like there's some really good stuff in here. Like it does feel like with another couple of iterations, you could get rid of some of the weird flack and dead ends that don't really work or signal things better to the audience.
Right.
This leads us to the third act where I feel like the episode falls apart.
Yeah,
There's a lot of fun stuff in this third act.
There's a lot of fun stuff, not least of which a council of bad guys dressed like they're straight out of the music video for Sharp Dressed Man by ZZ Top.
I mean, we've seen these sort of top-headed figures in the village previously.
That's true, we have. And in the village and outside of the village.
Right. Like, we haven't previously mentioned it, but it's Peter Madden, right, who's like the top hat dude who shows up to grab 6 at the beginning of every episode, right? In this flashback. He's credited as the Undertaker, which I thought was fun.
Of course.
The script calls these guys top hats,
of course,
which I thought was fun.
Yeah.
As like a proper noun for what they are. They're all wearing sunglasses for some reason.
They are. Apparently that was McGowan's idea, is that what if they were all just wearing dark sunglasses, which I take to be like, oh, that way they're protected from the radio waves or something like that so that they don't get hypnotized by speed learn. But that's never communicated very well. They're just wearing sunglasses.
No, it's not. And it's also like they take off their sunglasses before the lesson.
They do,
So, I mean, anyway. So there's this fun bit where we see one of these top hat guys actually just like out and about in the village first. We see him with the waiter from earlier,
Yep.
right? This is number 54, but later he'll be number 46 when he has the top hat on. And so he does this quick, back and forth about, asking the same questions we've heard. Best of luck with your exams. And then he and another top hat guy come deliver something to 2 and 12 now in top hats themselves, which is supposedly like the next lesson or something.
Right.
Right. And
I want to point something out just really quick.
Mhm.
I don't want to talk about it because I want to talk about it later, but I want to point it out here just to signpost it, as you said.
Yep.
Before
Mhm.
we get them, we get the professor's wife and the doctor looking at the professor in
Sure.
bed, asking if he'll be all right, if he will be capable. I think the wife says something to the effect, asks something to the effect of, will he be able to give his next lecture? And the doctor says, able and willing.
Mm-hmm.
The only other time that we've seen the doctor is when his face was smashed in by number 6.
Is that true? I thought we got a scene with like...
The only other time that we've seen the doctor in bed like this is
I see.
when we saw number 6 smash his face in.
Right.
Is this really the professor? Or is this another sculpture?
I think it's really him. Well, that's a great point, because we do get the sense that like the professor's wife has not gotten to see the professor for a while.
Right. I'm not going to answer that question right now. Let's continue.
Yeah, fair point. So, there's a bunch of hullabaloo. 2 says to summon the board, which is interesting.
Mm-hmm.
We get the sense of like there's other decision makers outside of 2 who are like their opinion matters in terms of the future of this experiment.
Right.
Right? Like 2 has to convince them, which is really interesting. There's even this bit earlier of like after the face smashing that we didn't mention, but the doctor even says like, oh, I've got to contact
Control
people. I got to let them, I got to let Control know that 6 is on to us.
Yeah.
And 2 is like, nope, don't do that.
You do
Two-
your job, I'll do mine.
Yeah. Because 2 really wants this to seem like it's going as smoothly as possible.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Anyway, I thought that was just a little fun bit of characterization.
Yeah, that lends credence to this idea of there is something going on from the organization outside that has been imported into the village for this moment.
Exactly. So there's this really fun little bit of like, as the board comes in, and we also see number 6 dressed up as a top hat guy, which is fun.
Yep. I appreciate that they basically skip over how did he get this disguise? How did he sneak in? Like, I'm very happy to just gloss over that. That's good storytelling.
Yeah, he has the number 56 badge. Who knows where he got it? I assume that there's some old man who's in a bush outside who he just like beat up and stole his clothes.
Yep.
But the way that they give these passes, right, is this little like money taker toy, right? They put the pass down, and this little like hand juts out, grabs it, and pulls it back.
Right. It's a little bit like this device you may have seen where it's like you push a button to open the box, and then a hand darts out of the box to close it again or something like that.
Yes.
Do you know what this thing actually is?
No, what is it?
It is a toy
Yes.
that uses Thing from the Addams Family, produced for the Addams Family TV show.
Oh, I didn't know that. That's great.
That Patrick McGowan brought in one day and said, isn't this neat? Let's use this somehow.
Yeah, that's cool. I mean, I did hear in some of my stuff that this was like suggested by McGowan to use this.
Yeah, but no, it is explicitly the toy from the Addams Family.
That's funny.
That is just repainted and reused.
Huh.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
So presumably you'd get it and like put a penny in that slot, right?
Yeah, of course.
These props are probably pennies with paper put over them.
Totally.
Yeah. Or whatever they have in England.
Farthings, probably.
English pennies. So there's, hang on.
Yeah.
What are English coins?
I'm glad we got a Googling bit.
Oh, they have pennies.
Oh, thank goodness.
All right, hang on. 1 penny.
Yep.
2 pence.
Yep.
5 pence. 10 pence. 20 pence. 50 pence. £1. 2 pounds. There's a 2 pound. Wow.
Yeah. There's a 2 pound coin.
Wow.
I think I have some downstairs in a little like money bank that looks like a one of those red phone booths. This is nothing.
No.
Anyway. So they're specifically called later on that they are the education board.
Okay.
Right? These are these people who are going through and are like placing these little passes in.
Makes sense.
Electro passes.
Yeah. So these passes, we should say they're inside the interior of the village's like
administration building.
Yeah, we are not in a Port Miriam building here. We are in a deeply sci-fi labyrinth kind of space.
Totally. But I do find it really fun that they use this really toyetic thing.
Yes,
right?
Absolutely.
Because it is in keeping with some other things we've seen in the village in terms of very sort of toyetic technology.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
There were Tinker toys, literal Tinker toys in the very first episode, right? Rover himself is just a big old beach ball, right? I should have mentioned earlier, number 46 and 54, the top hat / cafe guy is Ian Fleming, but not Ian Fleming who wrote Bond.
I bet he never got tired of getting asked.
Oh, I'm sure he hated it. He's the Australian-born British actor. He was most famous for playing Dr. Watson a lot.
Gotcha.
Alongside Arthur Wantner's Holmes. Just thought that was fun.
Yep.
So I think we can do this next bit pretty fast because there's just like action for a bit here.
Yeah, there's some patrol guards who. Yep. Okay, no. First of all, number 6 discovers that you have to use the pass, otherwise you get fried.
You get exploded.
Although the second one is the lethal explosion, so you have to use the thing coin bank. Yeah. He discovers some guards who are patrolling, literally like walking up to each other face to face and then turning around and walking away. He knocks one of them out. He uses a disturbance to call the other one and knock him out. He hides them in some lockers.
Waving his hand like this.
Like a real come hither, like tricking the guard into sneaking around. Real good stuff. He gets into the projection chamber.
Yeah.
Where he's supposed to use this microfilm, switch it out for switch the subversive lecture out for the lecture that's supposed to be there. There's a periscope that he has to operate. I'm not clear what the periscope does or why it's part of this.
It's awesome, though.
But yeah, he knocks out the technician that's there, but not before the technician stabs him in the hand.
Yeah, so he's bleeding. This technician is Bet Bourne, credited under the dead name Peter Bourne. So we'll use he, him throughout, but Bet Bourne was a radical drag queen.
Cool.
Who is the founder of Blue Lips, which is a gay theatrical company in London. He only died in August 2024.
Wow.
Which is pretty wild. I just think it's interesting. This episode is, as we've indicated, pretty darn gay. And then we have like this guy who's just sort of like snuck in here.
Yeah, just again, like a bad guy in Dr. Evil's lair who is wearing sunglasses and using a periscope. It's like people doing the work.
Yeah. The 2 guards, I should just say briefly, that's George Leach, who's a stuntman in a bunch of Bond films and also a Star Wars stormtrooper in the Pink Panther films, and Jack Cooper, who's a stuntman in Willow, Time Bandits, and Superman 2. So some good stunt people in this ep.
Cool.
Even if, again, who knows about this action?
I mean, it's serviceable, right? Like
it's fine.
Yeah.
So they're doing this like last minute check-ins, right? There's number 2 and number 12, and there's this big round, table that everybody's sat down on, all members of the education board, which suggests there might be other boards, which is kind of fun.
And this is where number 12 is giving the rundown of like, here's what Speed Learn does. Here's how it works. Here's how we can use it for evil purposes.
Well, he doesn't actually get there because it's only later that we get number 2 saying, for now, we must be okay with history, but soon we shall be making our own.
Right. This is where we get the line of like, you need to have the character of the professor in place.
Yes.
You can't just beam stuff into people's head. You have to have this source of knowledge that people trust to have it work.
And they're doing their last minute check-ins, their video screen, they're zooming in, they're doing some Google Meet calls, FaceTiming into all their friends to see how they're getting ready for the broadcast.
Yep.
And it's then that they see number 6, who is now wearing the projector operator's outfit. He's done another costume change off screen, but he hasn't dealt with his bleeding hand. And so 2 immediately recognizes it's 6. Instantly clocks him.
Right.
12 is just like, oh, he's hurt his hand. And 2 is like, yes, he has hurt his hand. 6 is immediately knocked out.
Yeah.
It is very funny that somebody just immediately gets the drop on 6.
He's up. He's not even like in a booth or anything like that. He's up on like a railing. So presumably
Yes.
he would have not only heard these two people come inside, but like
Yes.
climb onto the metal railing or something like that. But no, he's so in the zone on this periscope. They just get him.
This is part of why this episode just like straight up does not work.
It does not.
Anyway, they get him. We just do an immediate jump cut to after the lesson, right?
Right. They got him quickly enough that they got the subversive message out, but the real one in.
Yep. It's, as far as we can tell, it's a full success, right?
For the village.
The announcer, says, again, well done on another thingamabobble. And we come in on 12 questioning 6, which is just great, right?
Right.
Great to have 12 be the one questioning 6 in this scene.
Who let you in here?
Yeah, who could it have been? And he goes, Santa Claus. 2 is sort of over this. He doesn't think this questioning is worth it. 2 has, as far as we can tell, already clocked what's actually going on here, right?
Seems that way.
And so he instead calls the general's office and says, hey, we're on the way, right? We just got some questions for the general. And we get this fun bit of just marching through corridors for a little.
There's a lot of varied music in this. Again, Albert Elms putting in the work, putting together a lot of different kinds of music. But yeah, they march not quite in formation, but as close as you can in these hallways to another room that simply says the general.
We also, I should mention, this is where we get a quick call with the prisoner's wife, or the prisoner's wife, keeps doing this. The professor's wife, right?
Right.
In which she asks to see her husband. Number 2 says, oh, maybe he's after he's finished the next lecture, but of course he needs you, right?
Of course.
And he says this line here, which I think, tells us everything we need to know about what's going on with the prisoner's wife, the professor's wife, which is lovely woman, warm, sympathetic. She would talk him into anything to keep him alive.
Yes.
So I think with this line, we get this pretty clear little story that's going on of the prisoner, the professor and the professor's wife come to the village, maybe initially willingly, to do this experiment. The professor pretty much immediately is like, no, this is garbage. I don't like this. But to keep him alive, the professor's wife works with the village wardens to like placate him to keep him going. Right. So it's, we don't get any focus on it, but it is this little tragedy of like this love for this person twisting you to harm them.
Yes. It is doing a lot of work.
Yes. You're correct.
We also get, number 2 is chiding number 6 for this rash action and speaking about the problem of rebellion. And the prisoner says, number 6 says, the professor, and number 2 says, oh, no. We've got him under control. No problem.
He has an adoring wife.
Yes.
Which we would love to have to give to you, 6, as we keep on trying to shack you up with different ladies.
Yeah.
He also says, an even more attentive doctor. Lovely fellow. People love him. They'll take anything from him. It's the image you see that's important. The kindly image. And that's when we get the general call. They go to the general. There's all these books around. The professor is there. He's typing away. Tippy.
Yeah, it's like an office, right? Big, nice wooden desk, typewriter.
Very stereotypical.
Shelves of impressive leather-bound books.
And then we get the reveal. The curtain passes, and it's a big old computer.
It is a big old sci-fi computer.
Bunch
of knobs.
Bunch of knobs, some output reading things,
bunch of
some levers. Yeah. 2 has a great line here. All the professor's own work. He gave birth to it. He loves it with a passionate love, but probably hates it even more. Great little bit. Great little bit.
So he says that. We get very little from the professor in this moment.
No, not at all.
He seems to be very focused on his work. He's marching around, putting stuff into this machine that converts his written notes into the film that needs to go into the general to basically feed knowledge into it. The moments that we do get the professor, he's sort of like standing proudly. He's sort of smiling with the satisfaction of a job well done, as number 2 describes what the general is capable of answering any question, right? He doesn't seem to either react to or affirm anything about this idea of like loving it with a passionate love or hating it even more, right? It's almost as if he's not really a person.
Oh, that's interesting. I mean, he's supposed to be mind wiped or whatever, but
is he
brainwashed? I mean, the whole thing, they do see him injecting him with supposedly drugs, right? We know that they can do this sort of like mind washing, brainwashing thing, right?
Right.
Anyway, we're almost at this end. Let's get to the end.
Sure.
So this is where we get the great line of, for the time being, past history will do. Shortly, we'll be making our own, which is like, okay, here's the plan, right? We're going to mass produce this, and we're going to use this to control what people think about the past.
Right.
Right? That's the whole thing.
It is the aim, the goal.
And then we get the two doing the clearly leading sort of statements that he wants to input into the general. Right?
Yeah. Let's find out how number 6 got in here.
Yes. First of all, these passes can only come through administration. Now, number 12 works in administration. What do you think of that, computer? I passed this. I thought we should bring this into our own moment, right? So I sent to ChatGPT exactly what what number 2 says, which is point 1, a traitor in the village. Point 2, security pass discs were issued to number 6. Point 3, access to these is through administration. Point 4, number 12 is an official in the administration. Who did number 6 conspire with? ChatGPT says, based on the clues you provided, it seems that number 6 may have conspired with number 12. Thanks, ChatGPT.
A perfect thinking machine.
It can answer any question.
It can answer any question.
But then the incredible confidence of our Milky Boy here is finally tested. As 6 says, well, how about you let me ask the machine a question?
No.
You should have done.
End of episode.
Yay! 2 gets a promotion.
Yep.
Also, this whole time, 6 is like has like a sling for his injured hand for some reason.
For his owie.
And he clearly just like writes 4 symbols on a typewriter, gets it, says to feed it in, and then immediately everything starts going nonsense, right? Like everything's exploding. Yeah,
the computer begins like overclocking itself or something like that. Smoke begins pouring out of it. There's a gauge that says normal and danger. It just immediately is like danger, danger, danger.
I need that for my computers.
I need that for me. I just want that as a t-shirt. The number 2 yells at the professor to like turn it off, and the professor is like grabbing switches and turning knobs and says, I can't. He seems to be like stuck to it from some electrical charge or something like that.
I was reading it as he had like grabbed a red hot piece of metal that's hanging off the machine for some reason, and his hand is like burnt onto it.
Oh, maybe. Anyway, this computer is going to die.
Yes. So the computer dies. 2 runs up. The little film they feed in has been completely destroyed.
Oh,
right?
No. Importantly, number 12, for whatever reason, tries to save the professor.
Yes, this is interesting. And dies as well?
Yeah.
Question mark for some reason. So then number 2, runs up, grabs the film, says, what was the question? And this is when we get number 6 thinking he's the cleverest guy who's ever existed. He says, the question is insoluble for man or machine. What was it? W-H-Y? Question mark. Why? I asked ChatGPT why, and it said, could you clarify what you're asking about? I'd love to help.
Yeah, there's in the initial batch of facts.
Yeah.
He answers, hang on, I'm bringing who is Bismarck's ally against Prince Christian of Glucksburg?
Yeah.
And then the answer is Frederick of Austenburg. And then it explains why. Yeah. Because he'd never accepted the 1852 Treaty of London.
Yeah.
The general is capable of answering these questions.
So let's talk about this. So I'm going to do a quick history lesson about AI here, multiple hours into this recording.
Matthew, why are you qualified to give us a history of AI?
Hi,
I know. I'm trying to explain.
I get it.
Yeah.
Hi, everybody. My name is Dr. Matthew Guzdial. I'm an assistant professor and Canada CFAR AI chair at the University of Alberta, which is a world leader in artificial intelligence.
Right. All that to say, you actually have like professional credentials to speak on this, above and beyond it being the hot button issue of the technological world right now.
Yeah. To be clear, I and Brendan are 100% the weird, 100% against the weird AI bros who are just crypto bros that have metastasized into AI bros. Mm-hmm. A bunch of unethical stuff happening there. But let's talk about history. So you already mentioned this is in like 1966 that this is filmed, right?
68.
68, sorry.
7.
So by...
What is Australia?
So by this time, people might think, oh, AI existed since 2023, right? No. The Dartmouth Workshop, which is where the term artificial intelligence got coined, is from 1956, right? So this is already a term that exists for a decade minimum. Prior to this, rote learning was actually approached by Arthur Samuel, who's one of the sort of originators of computer checkers, which is trying to get computers to play checkers, right? And this was a computer program that could play at like the level of a checkers amateur, right? By sort of like, you could think of it like simulating forward what the game state might be like after certain numbers of moves. Just a quick shout it out. Jonathan Schaefer, who just recently retired like 2 weeks ago at time of recording, from the University of Alberta, actually is the person who solved checkers. If you're wondering why nobody plays checkers professionally anymore, that's Jonathan Schaefer. Anyway, this is to say that since like the 1940s, there had already been technology around that could do sort of like automated learning in gameplay. It could do sort of forward simulation, things like this, right? This time period was referred to as the first, in retrospect, the first AI summer, which is when there was like a lot of funding for AI.
All the AI was kissing.
Exactly. Long hair and beards.
Yeah.
If you're curious, we're currently in the third AI summer right now at time of recording. We'll see how long that lasts.
Is the AI summer in the southern hemisphere?
Yeah. Good question. I think it's mostly a northern hemisphere thing.
Sure.
Anyway, so this is all to say that like this would be the kinds of things that would be in the milieu that like people would be aware of if they pay attention to like public science stuff, right? Around how does AI work?
Right.
And so if you're thinking about this in terms of this sort of like forward simulation or tree search of like Arthur Samuel's checkers program or this rote learning, right? Which connects to this episode. It's still rote learning, right? Then you totally can get a computer overclock itself in terms of trying to forward simulate and come up with, not an explanation, but a correct sort of move in a game of checkers, for example.
Right.
And I think that's interesting in terms of The Prisoner, which so often treats things in terms of games, right? Or playing things in terms of games. Right. And so I think that, to us, it's a bit silly that this happens, right? But if this is the kind of technology that exists and it's how you think that like super AI will work in the future, it sort of works, right? And I say all this to just try to give the listener a sense of like the background information that a viewer at the time would be coming to this episode with.
Right. I think you can definitely see in number 2 and the people that are in charge of the village, the kind of speculative ambition that people view AI with here in 2024, where there's this feeling of, I'm going to be able to use this to do anything. Here is a demonstration with which I'm going to convince you to give me an incredible amount of authority and an incredible amount of power and money.
Right.
Like
exactly.
Those two things are in lockstep with one another, right? This idea of I can use this to do just enough to convince you that it is worth it is the thing of the future, even if it is badly deficient in many different ways.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, number 2 is an AI bro, right?
It seems that way, yeah.
He's got his venture capitalist coming in.
Yep.
He's got his startup idea. He's looking for $1 billion in unicorn funding.
He's on that paleo milk diet.
He's on that paleo milk diet. They only drank milk. Paleolithic man only drank milk.
It's actually backwards from the way we think about how milk got digested.
Joe Rogan is going to show up in the village tomorrow. Anyway.
Well, I mean, that, you joke, but I made the comparison between the professor and, this sort of personality-driven delivery very, very deliberately, right? Just as much as we might worry about technology, particularly like history being presented as if it is completely unvarnished and unbiased and not being presented from some sort of perspective. This idea of objective history, objective reporting. This idea of like people presenting themselves as authority figures, regardless of what their actual credentials are.
Totally.
Like, we just went through the trouble of saying like, hey, Matthew is someone that has actually done the work to like learn about these things, to speak on this thing. We don't know what the professor's credentials are. He just looks like someone you'd think of as a professor, right?
Right.
And much of that might be stage dressing.
It might be.
Yeah.
Go ahead. No.
Well, this is ridiculous.
Oh,
But
I look forward to this.
Part of, we've talked about this episode and why it doesn't work for in a number of ways. One of the things that I harped on at the very start was like, there's so many people here, none of it really gets developed with any kind of depth. Part of the problem there is this character of the professor, right? This character who supposedly doesn't want to be doing what he's doing.
Yep.
But is being indoctrinated or otherwise forced, but also seems to act perfectly willingly as an accomplice of number 2 here in this, like very, very, never above and beyond this tape recorder, which again might be a performance of some kind, gets any kind of interiority or statement of what it is that I want, what I think the situation is like and how I want to change it.
Sure.
Almost as if he's just sort of an empty, hollow suit of some kind. Perhaps some sort of construct that has been built by a master artist who's capable of rendering lifelike things. I think a lot of this only works for me if you think that the real professor is just a robot. Is a robot that has been given all of this information, and the general is the capacity to turn that information into something that can be beamed out more broadly. Now, why? And that ties in with this idea of like, he gave birth to it. He loves it with a passionate love. He probably hates it even more.
Sure.
This is robot on robot violence. But likewise, is there now who else might want to see this thing destroyed? Who else might be synthetic and desperate to destroy this abomination, but to save his fellow construct in this moment? That's right. Number 12 is also a robot.
Okay.
It's the only way that it all works.
Okay. So you've brought up robots in the village before.
I have, unsuccessfully.
We know what computers look like, right? The general is what computers look like.
Here's okay. We don't see Rover in this episode, but Rover exists.
It's true.
Rover's sentient, isn't he? He has dog level intelligence. He's not sapient, I don't think. Wait, are dogs sapient? Which one's the other one?
You got it. Sapient is like self-aware,
right?
Or like capable of critical reasoning, like us,
right?
Anyway, I mean, I was gonna bring up that Rover isn't in this episode too, but for different reasons. Rover is such a can of worms, right? Like, there's a group of weirdos who sit in a cave worshiping him, supposedly, or something.
Also
right?
wearing sunglasses.
Also wearing sunglasses that protects you from the beams. Okay, so let's say they're robots for a second.
Sure.
All right, so we're saying that the prisoner's wife made them both in your reading?
I think she made the professor, certainly.
I see, and the professor
treats,
made the general.
Yes.
Okay. So this is like a...
And yeah, I think, number 12 is their son.
Okay. Okay. I mean, so I think if they were supposed to be robots, this final scene wouldn't necessarily work, right? The final scene is 6 completely silent, which is really interesting. It's completely different from how we would usually do this. It's a long shot of 6 walking up to the professor's wife in the distance.
In the garden.
Theoretically.
He supposedly to like... We don't actually know, but we have
no idea.
Assume because of the framing and the music that it is to deliver the news that her husband and son are dead.
Shut up.
Her perfect
and she
middle
just like
voice.
And she sits down and she's like, like she's overcome with grief.
Yeah, like she's just heard some hard news.
Right. And, we have all these scenes of her wanting to see the professor, this whole time, right? And like, if she had the capacity to just build another husband, I don't see where this is coming from.
I think she did. There was an empty one in the bed.
I think that's just a sculpture. If it was meant to be a robot, right? Like there would have been some interiority to the thing. It wouldn't just be a shell.
I don't think she builds the circuitry. I think she builds the shell that the robot goes inside.
Who builds the circuitry?
I don't know. It's like Blade Runner. It's not just one person putting things together. You got one person that does the skin, one person that does the eyes.
So I don't think this worked because I think that it is the professor who made the general, right? Because otherwise this isn't a failure for the village, right? Like if somebody else who isn't the professor
could build the general, then this wouldn't be a problem. Yeah.
Then they just do it again.
That's
right?
a good point.
So I think it has to be, I think we have to take it at face value that it is true the professor made the general, right? 2 doesn't have a reason to lie to 6 in this moment. He's gleeful. He thinks he's won, right? He's just saying shit.
That's true. He is. He loves it with a passionate love. Maybe the reason the professor doesn't react is like he's like, what the hell? I don't love it with a passionate love. What are you talking about?
You're weird, man.
You're a freak milkman.
So I think that the professor did have to make the general.
Okay.
And I think the professor did come from outside the village. I could believe that the professor might be artificial in some capacity, but I don't think that I don't think the village has the capacity to build another professor.
Right. Which is why this is such a setback. Yeah.
Exactly. Right? Like this is a complete loss for the general plan.
Right.
Right? So I can't think that they still have access to the resources to make another general,
right,
and or professor.
Okay, then then in that case the ending doesn't work at all.
I mean,
like if he hates it so much, why did he try to save it?
So my reading again is that he's been brainwashed, right? Very similarly to how 6 was brainwashed in the last episode. Not in the scenes where he's supposed to think he's 12, but when he's in like the reprogramming mode, right? And he's being reverted to this sort of like very malleable, childlike state, right? Who's just sort of like listening to orders and things.
Right.
Right?
Okay.
So that's my reading, given that we've seen the village do brainwashing before. And it makes sense to me.
Yeah, and the only other scenes that we get of the professor really are of his doctor administering to him, and number 2, describing how important it is that his doctor takes care of him.
Right.
Yeah.
And so the ready and willing coming from the doctor, right, is to me like, well, I've just brainwashed him again.
Yeah.
I injected him with the beer juice from the cave that makes you do whatever we say for the next 24 hours, right? Anyway, so that's my reading of this. Write in with your personal headcanons. Don't do that. What I want to talk about here, the thing that I kept on gesturing at I'm stepping up to the plate now. I've got my bat in my hands and I'm about to beat this episode with the bat. No,
he's gone to pieces.
We talked before about numbers having particular roles.
Yes.
Right? Like number 26 is the assistant to number 2, is the labor exchange manager. Number 12 is maybe somebody an outside operative who comes to the village for a particular goal, right? What do we think the role of number 6 is?
Ooh.
Like what is, and this is not from the TV's perspective, right? The TV show's perspective. This is from the warden's perspective. What is number 6 for?
How does the village interact with him? They entreat him to join their society.
Yes.
They offer him power.
Yes.
They capture him when he tries to leave.
Yes.
They give him things that he thinks that he wants and then reveals that they are empty.
Yep. Your earlier reading in this episode, right? The one that I shared, that number 12 is using number 6 as like a weapon.
Right.
Like a missile he can direct at this project.
He's almost like, not village idiot, but like local troublemaker.
Yeah, or like a vigilante. He's like a third estate outside of the power structures of the village.
Right.
That because of his circumstances can make change, can affect the village in ways.
Can affect,
right?
Almost like how Batman can save Gotham City, but will never like invest money into its downtown area and change its government in any major way.
Exactly, Brendan. I think number 6 is Batman.
You know what? Say more.
I think that the role that the village wardens want for number 6 is something like this. Somewhere they can deploy to solve a problem as like to leverage his sense of justice, right?
Sure.
And that he will, outside of their power structures, right? We just read those power structures in this episode where like number 12, even if he wanted to get rid of this experiment, can't just do it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like he doesn't have the authority. Number 6, because he's outside of the power structure, has the capacity to do that.
Has the
right?
capacity and the gumption, right? Is willing to like knock out some guards, get stabbed, do some stuff. Mm-hmm. And like you gestured at when he's on the beach making the decision is like, no, I'm going to do this. 1, because I want to stick it to the village, and 2, because foiling this is more important than me getting out of here or something like that. That makes sense.
Yeah. It's kind of like how Commissioner Gordon might be like, hey, Batman, I can't do this because there's all these corrupt cops around.
Right.
But you can do it. So number 12 basically bat signals 6 in this episode.
Gosh. So then, okay, if this is the thing that the village wants number 6 to be, if this is the designation of the number 6 role, is that then like, is that almost a devil's advocate kind of role?
Yes.
Of like, we want, taking it for granted that we want the general experiment to work. We're in charge of the village. You and me, we're both number 1. And we're like, the general experiment is a good idea. We can being able to control what information people have about the past is a good idea.
Yep.
We need to really litmus test this thing, and it's almost perfect. But what we need to do is make sure that it's immune to bad actors. So let's send it to the village so that number 6 can bang his head against it. And if he can perforate it, then it's not ready for prime time.
Exactly. And why then would number 12 go and try to save the professor? Because it's not the problem that he actually wants this experiment generally to not be possible to succeed. He's just trying to get this version of it to fail.
Yeah, we need to firm it up more.
Exactly.
Oh, boy.
Right? And, and we can't talk about it yet, right? But, like, there's stuff later on, I think, that does echo this, right? And what I was saying last episode about, he no longer cares about escape, or like escape is not thing. He's embraced the role of number 6. The first 2/3 of this episode, or first half of this episode, are about checking. Hey, did we get it out of you? Is your preference now not escape, but actually doing these things, right? Of changing the village in the ways we want you to try to change the village. But notably, right? What does he actually accomplish here? No circumstances have changed in the village. Speedlearn is dead, sure. Okay, who cares, right?
Yeah. If you take this as pre A, B, and C, then it is unrattled number 2, so that's good.
Yes, a number 2, who maybe was sent to potentially fail.
Right.
Right? He's weirdly arrogant. Maybe we, knock him down a few pegs.
Right. And this solves something for me that I don't think I had really realized previous, which is we understand number 6 to be a government agent who has a certain set of skills, who might be a spy, might be something like that. But what is it that really makes him so invaluable that the village wants him on side? And this idea of consulting secret agent who you can throw at a problem to see what the holes in it are. Almost like hiring a hacker to try and break into your systems so that you know what's wrong with your security, so that when the real ones hit it, you'll have those sealed up.
Yeah.
That's a very good guy to have on your side.
Exactly. And even better, right? You don't really need to have him on your side. Why do they not care about his reason for resigning this whole time? Because it doesn't matter. They have the thing they want him doing. He's doing it, right? They've got him. So the other thing I was going to bring up, right, and I said I was going to, is Rover's not in this episode. Why is Rover not in this episode? We've already gestured at the fact that Rover might be getting commands from somebody above number 2, right? That Rover is doing things outside of what number 2 would consider to be the right thing to do.
Right. We gestured at this when we were talking about why does he kill Curtis in Schizoid Man.
Yeah. And if that's true, and if this reading is correct, right, that not correct, but is supported in this way, then the village wardens, the higher level people, the decision makers here, don't deploy Rover because the whole thing is they want this situation, right? They could have had Rover patrolling the grounds of the professor's wife's place.
They could have,
right?
Yeah.
They could have had it outside administration, and then there's no way number 6 would have gotten in unless he had a buggy to play chase with Rover with again. He's not in there at all, right? So this is my perspective on this episode. Again, from the perspective of, from the last episode, Schizoid Man, that they've won, basically. Right? That number 6 is convinced he's number 6. You'll note he doesn't argue that he's number 6 in this episode at all. There's nothing of, no, this is the residence for number 6, right? Or why do you call me that? Or any of that garbage, right? No little witty rejoinders. He's just accepted, I'm number 6, and I'm going to do the number 6 thing.
Might be onto something, Matthew.
Yeah, we'll see. I mean, this is not the only time that we'll have, as you gestured at, a Monsters of the Week episode, right?
Right, but I gestured before. This is a very mercenary episode. This is one that was made to spec, basically. But it is one that McGowan reportedly was really, really pleased with when it first came in. It seemed to fit really in line with a lot of the stuff that he was thinking about doing.
Yep.
And I think that speaks well to what they tried to do with it. Like we've said, I think there's a lot of stuff in how everything is put together, and where the focus is, and so on and so forth, that make it not work. In addition to the internal consistencies that I've pointed out, I think we can repair it, but there are some things that just don't work.
I completely agree with you. I mean, I called out certain scenes. They're just why is this even here? Right. But I think, if we have first-time listeners, and I do believe or first-time watchers, and I believe we do have some first-time watchers who are watching along with us. We're so glad to have you. I hope you're enjoying yourself. If I'm right? And if it's the case that they're okay, we really want to check to see, have we gotten it out of him?
Right.
Have we gotten it out, this desire to escape, or this, we fully removed escape as a clear possibility from his mind? What would you, dear listener, as the village wardens, do next? And just think about that as we prepare for our next episode.
We'll talk about our next episode in a moment, but first, number 1 with a bullet. Your shining light in The General.
Do you want to go first this time, or should I?
You go first.
Okay. I really struggled with this one. as I said, I'm more positive on this episode than you. I like this episode,
Totally.
and part of it is this consistent like reading that I've had this whole time of what's going on in this whole series that makes it make sense to me as a whole.
Mm-hmm.
But I usually am like, okay, what's a bit player who had a really good part? Did a really good acting job. I don't think we've got that this time, really. There's like people that are close but not quite there. And then I thought, okay, well, what else can I do? Brennan often like just gives it to a cool and interesting sequence. And then I thought, what's the part of this episode I really did like? And what I really did like is the speed learn sequence.
Speed learn.
Of them broadcasting the weird pans over the professor's face.
Yeah. The music, the light, the pacing of that all really, really works well. I think that's excellent.
It's a word that I don't like to say a lot because I think it's overused, but it is a bit Lynchian.
I agree. I think it definitely is of a kind with that kind of material.
Yeah. How about you?
Just to reinforce, there's some good acting in here. Colin Gordon is terrific. Number 2. I
100%.
really wish we had a third episode with him in there. John Castle's number 12 again is a treat. I think I really, I joked a lot about the situations he engineers to have conversations with number 6, but I think he does well. I think he's
for sure
a fun. I've said before that it is nice when in the rare moments where we have someone that number 6 can sort of confide with as an ally or something like that. And this is a rare instance where he has one that does not betray him in the end, right? Like this is someone who, even if he is using number 6 for his own reasons, does not stab him in the back or give himself away as I was working for the village the whole time. Maybe he was going to, but he died before he could get to that point.
Yeah.
I likewise really just have to give it up for the speed learn sequence. I think that little bit I think really works well. I think that sequence does the work of convincing you like this is technology that is
beyond what we have right now.
It is beyond, and it is a threat. It is strange and uncanny in a way that is worth number 6's attention, in a way that I like the weird labyrinth of the village infrastructure, but the tech that is on display there really does not come across as dangerous or impressive. Like the periscope doesn't make any sense. There's a weird whirly gig. The thing bank security mechanism is neat and cute, but it's not especially scary.
I mean, it can explode you if you try to go past twice.
It's only the second one is lethal. You can get exploded once, no problem.
Me? I can get exploded once, no problem. A guy like me? Is this the first time that we've had the same number 1 with a bullet?
Might be. I was thinking maybe I should come up with another one, but no, I'm sticking with it.
If you do want another one, I do think the number thing hand would be my in the number 2 spot. I think it's really fun, and I think it like plays really nice. Like we don't get anything else in this episode really that like touches on the Pop Goes the Weasel sort of children's rhyme, sort of theming that's in this series. So it's nice to have a little bit of that here.
It doesn't make any sense, but I do love the education board's black tie, top hat, sunglasses outfit. It doesn't make any sense, but
I mean, this is just how people of this rank dress in the village, right?
I guess.
It's just their uniform.
I guess. Number 2 is wearing it. Number 2 wears the top hat for the rest of the episode, I'm pretty sure. Which, if I had a top hat,
yeah, you're right.
Why wouldn't I keep wearing it? Although he's wearing it indoors, which is kind of gauche.
It is. I do love the way that they zoom in on his face for the final why. It's really good. Colin Gordon, what a guy.
Yeah.
So then ratings.
Let's rate the show.
Do you want to go first or shall I?
I will go first. I'm
curious.
Oh boy. This is definitely my least favorite Prisoner episode so far.
Really? Wow. I guess that's fair.
Yeah, there's stuff here that just doesn't hang together. As much as I like the performances and as much as I like what it's trying to do with theme, I think it really just doesn't click for me. It doesn't compel me the same way that a lot of the rest of it does. I'm going to give this episode 50% attendance rating, 50% out of 100 pass rate.
Oh no, Brendan, we're going to do a similar bit again. Because I'm more positive on this episode, so I'm going to give it the real enrollment numbers of 72.4%.
Wretched. Unbelievable.
It's, it's almost a C. It's a C minus, but, it can work on it, and
Sure.
it could get there. Best of luck with your exams.
I think that ship might have sailed if exams are around the corner, but we won't have to worry about that as we leave the general far behind. Because next time we will be watching Many Happy Returns. I lost where I wrote it down. But thankfully,
you found it.
I remembered it through the power of rote memorization.
Nice. This is one of the most controversial episodes.
Many Happy Returns?
Many Happy Returns.
Many Happy Returns. One of the most controversial episodes.
Mm-hmm. Be really interesting when we get to it. But not yet. Brendan, thank you so much.
Hey, thank you.
This is fun.
And thank you, likewise to our listeners.
Mm-hmm.
Appreciate you tuning in. Hope you've enjoyed our coverage of The Prisoner. If you've also enjoyed that, please give a listen to our bonus episode on Danger Man. Even if you haven't watched it, it's a treat. I think we summarized pretty well what's going on and what Danger Man brings to the table. We're going to do some other bonus episodes in the near future. We've got some interesting ideas, maybe some stuff you wouldn't expect, but we'll see. Cy Sweetman did our cover art. You can find more of his work at cyfsweetman.card.co. Devin Nelson made our theme song. Find more of their music at devindecibel.bandcamp.com. Matthew, where can people find you?
You can Google me. I'm pretty Googleable. Matthew Guzdial. But I have a Blue Sky now. I'm trying to use that more. I'm still on Twitter X, whatever you want to call it. I'm on Mastodon, but it's sort of like 2 other people. So I don't know if that's worth it. Hey, Brendan, where can people find you?
The idea of being asked to do your social media plugs or your website or project plugs or whatever, and then saying, yeah, you can find me at letmegooglethat.com/Matthew Guzdial is such a power move. My goodness.
I'm very Googleable. There's so. 5 Guzdials that exist. That's not true. There's a dozen of us or something.
I searched for Brendan McLeod the other day. While my social medias are pretty high up there, I share a name with a lawyer from Louisville, Kentucky.
Yeah.
Who threatened to kill 2 other attorneys.
Oh.
There's also a spoken word artist from Canada.
Oh,
who
threatened to kill 2 other attorneys.
Threatened to kill 2 other spoken word artists.
Hold on, I'm sensing a theme here with Brendan.
He's in a band from Vancouver. He plays as Brendan McLeod and the Fugitives.
Ooh, that's fun.
The group has been classified under many guises, including slam folk, folk hop, and spoken word cabaret.
All right.
I've never listened to him. Maybe I should.
Yeah, give it a try.
Matthew, I'll be seeing you.
Not if I see you first.